You guys! Let's talk Fire King. Let's talk Tiger King. So, for the sake of our Catholic review of the Tiger King, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about the entertainment value of everything, and then jump into how we can view this from a Catholic perspective. So I've got to tell you a little story as we get talking about this unbelievable Netflix documentary called Tiger King. I was actually on Netflix the very first night that it came out, and I was just sitting there. I was doing the classic scrolling through Netflix thing. I see Tiger King, and I was like, what is this thing? But I was kind of like, it seems like it might be, I don't know, it might be a little bit too much. Like there's no way that it's as entertaining as it looks like it is. And then, lo and behold, I get started with the show, and I watched it, stayed up super late, binged the whole thing that night. So yeah, it was pretty entertaining. I will say I'm not going to spoil anything for any of you guys. I'll try and keep things pretty broad in what I'm talking about. I won't go into any deep plot details. But man, there's so much to talk about. You have so many different personalities and characters that are so unique. You have Joe Exotic himself, obviously, who owns a zoo, has a whole bunch of tigers and other animals that, you kind of will debate later whether or not he should even have them at all, based on how he treats them and their living conditions and all of that. But he's got this zoo, and he lives a pretty rambunctious lifestyle, I mean, to say the least. He's carrying a gun around with him everywhere he goes. He's cussing up a storm. I mean, it's just, the quintessential Oklahoman zookeeper. Like, I don't know, I feel like if you were trying to imagine a zookeeper in Oklahoma, like, you couldn't even imagine who this guy is. Bleached blonde hair, mullet. I mean, it's just unreal. There's so many different components to the show. We could spend forever talking about everything that happens with Joe Exotic and all of that, that he goes through, but they also delve into other characters. Like, there's this Carol Baskin lady who owns a sanctuary, but it's also sort of like a zoo, but it's not. It's kind of hard to understand the difference there, but it adds an interesting dynamic to the show too. So you throw Carol Baskin into this situation, and she's somebody who, over the course of the show, we get kind of hammered over the head with the idea that she might have previously killed her husband. So there's like that angle to this, and then but her current husband doesn't seem to think that's even possible, and they seem happy, but yet there's also kind of this like, whoa, maybe she did do it. I don't know, Carol, and then you add in this guy named Doc Antle, who is basically a polygamist zookeeper, who has a zoo in South Carolina, and he's world famous for loaning out his tigers and big cats and animals to movie productions, to Hollywood, and you see celebrities going there, and it's just kind of this other world that I think is part of the reason why it's really got so much attention from so many people who now, because of the coronavirus, because a lot of us are stuck in the house more, we need entertainment. We need things to watch and to take up our time. And man, Netflix provided that. There's twists and turns along the way with things that happen to different characters. Again, I don't want to spoil anything in case any of you haven't seen it. But there's just so many personalities and circumstances that come up that you can't write that, and that's, I think, when life is so fascinating for us, is when things happen that you can't script. You just can't script these things happening. And that's what makes for great TV and what makes for great stories. So Tiger King, on an entertainment scale, if I had to rate this, I'd say it's great. It's a great way to spend some time. If you want to see an interesting story, if you're into the true crime stuff with a little bit of black comedy thrown in there, with some of Joe Exotic's just crazy antics with his songwriting. I thought Tiger, and it's not even him performing or singing the song. It's like he paid someone else to do it, we find out. Now, all that set aside, we have to talk about how we can approach this from a Catholic perspective. So first of all, I just want to address the content rating for this show. So It's rated TV MA, TV mature, and I really feel like that's the appropriate rating for this show. You have, again, every kind of circumstance you can imagine. Conspiracy for murder. You have murder. You have extortion. You have sexual immorality. You have cussing every other word. You know, improper use of guns, poor treatment of animals. Content-wise, there's just an endless amount of things that parents you would need to be worried about. So I can't recommend anyone under the age of maybe 16 or 17 watching this show. It's just hard for me to think about kids being exposed to everything that's in this show at a young age, and really being able to understand the gravity of what's going on, and the despair that and the darkness that drives a lot of those decisions and a lot of those motives and things, plot twists, and those things that are happening. For me, you got to be 16 or 17 or older to be able to really understand it. So I'm sticking with the TVMA for this one. Just to speak briefly about the content of this show, you know, we have a lot of themes that we could delve deeper into, but I want to focus first of all on the treatment of animals, because that's something that I think has been lost a little bit in different commentaries, reviews of this show, is just how clear it is that there's a real problem with zoos, with caging these wild animals that are meant to be out living in their natural habitats. You know, at one point they show Joe Exotic and his zoo people. They're bringing in the trucks of from Walmart of expired meat and feeding. That's what they're feeding their tigers. And you know, I don't know, maybe there's nothing wrong with that, but just thinking about this idea of these tigers being and these big cats, all these animals being fed expired food, and then you look in their cages and you see the confined spaces that they're in. You know, a lot of them are filled with just mud and dirt, and I think about the tiger being in its natural, majestic jungle, you know, and then to see them in this confined, tiny cage, even when there is a little bit more space for them to run around, I'm just kind of thinking, man, that's not how God intended for these cats to live. So I think we really need to talk about that, and to really think about how can we care for God's creation? How are we caring for God's creation in our own ways? Are we supporting these zoos that aren't taking proper care of the animals? Are we manipulating the cuteness of little baby tiger cubs or things for our own gain? We have to think about these questions and really understand that in Genesis, God made us the stewards, the rulers over creation, when he gave us intellect and when he gave us free will. And so we have a responsibility to creation, not to take poor care of it, but to understand that it's a gift from God. There are also a lot of sexual themes in this show that are really tough to grapple with. And I know that sexuality is a hard thing for us to talk about today, but you know, just even on the baseline understanding that people selling their sexuality for drugs, for employment, even for a roof over their heads, you know, those themes are present in this show, and that's really troubling, because it gets deep and digs deep into who we are again as human beings, that we're meant for more than the exploitation of our bodies. God created us good. God created us in his image, and in his likeness, and to see these people who are essentially selling themselves is really troubling. And it again, we really have to think about how are we treating each other? Are we valuing each other as human beings, or are we using each other? And that's really what Catholic teaching on sexuality comes down to, is are we using the other person? Deep questions, big stuff to think about, but I think that's an important thing that we can do with these kind of dramatic documentary TV show, Netflix shows that we just binge and we move on to the next one. I think it's important to take a little bit of time and really think about what it is that we're viewing, what it is that we're spending our time doing. What do you think? Have you seen Tiger King? Is the Tiger King quality family entertainment, or is it meant more for adults? How can we as Catholics better interact with creation and respect what God's given us? If you have thoughts, I invite you to subscribe to our channel, Pope Culture, like this video, and leave a comment. This has been a Pope Culture Catholic Review. And so until we meet again, God bless you.